Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Development Management Committee. My name is Councillor Garrick Stevens, and I'm the chair of the committee. Our vice chair is Councillor Fiona Guest, who's sitting in the front row here. The other members of the committee in attendance at this meeting are, starting at the back there, Councillor Hannell, Councillor Madden, Councillor Hobson, Councillor England, and Councillor Smith-Wright, Councillor Bromham, and Councillor Jankowski. In the front, we've got Councillor Anderson, Councillor Riddick, Councillor Williams, Councillor Durrant, and Councillor Guest. We've had a few apologies. I'll come to that in a minute. The officers in attendance this evening are Philip Stanley, who's Head of Development Management, and he's supported by James Gardner, Robert Freeman, Heather Eady, and Colin Lecart. And our legal advisor here is Leonard Odugwu, sitting beside me on the left, who's here to make sure that we comply with policy and, dare I say, the legal requirements. And Kaylee Johnson here is member support, and she takes the minutes and records the votes for us. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, but if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the ground floor and assemble outside. If the meeting is extended, there may be a comfort break during the meeting at around 9 p.m. In terms of apologies, we've got an apology from Councillor White-Low, and she's been substituted by Councillor Anderson. Councillor Symington is being substituted by Councillor Smith-Wright, and Councillor Patterson has been substituted by Councillor England. The minutes on the agenda this evening is to approve the minutes of the first item is to approve the minutes of the last meeting of the committee, which was held on the 5th of February, and the minutes have been circulated. Are these minutes agreed? Right, I'll sign it after the meeting. I've done apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. Please can I remind members to declare any disclosable pecuniary or other interest at the beginning of the relevant planning application, and any member who declares an interest will be allowed to stay in the meeting, but will not have the right to vote. I also want to remind members that only those present during the entire debate for an item are entitled to vote on it. Turning now to public participation. We have a number of members of the public who have registered to speak, and the list has been circulated. Our normal practice is to bring forward applications where a speaker is present. There'll be a bit of juggling this evening. You will be invited to address the meeting when the item you have registered to speak to is to be discussed. The normal procedure and rules in respect of times to speak will apply. Time per speaker is 3 minutes, and where more than one person is speaking for an application, the shared time is increased from 3 to 5 minutes, and the 5 minutes will be shared equally unless the sharing of time has otherwise been arranged prior to the meeting. Ward councillors will be entitled to their own 5 minutes to speak. Speakers in objection to the officer's recommendation are taken first. A timer will be displayed on the screen, and times will be strictly enforced. And members of the public will not be entitled to take part in the discussion that follows the public speakers. I have the discretion to remove any member of the public from the meeting if they interrupt, try to engage in the discussion, or are abusive. For each application, the officer will present the report to the committee, then the participants from the public are called to speak. Following this, questions are taken from the committee along with statements and comments for debate. There will be a vote among councillors which will represent the decision of the committee. Right. Before we move on to the first item, which is item 5A on Haresfoot Farm, first of all, I have a declaration of interest because I'm on the planning committee at Berkhamsted Town Council, and as a result, I am declaring an interest and will be standing down from the committee for this item, and Councillor Guest will be chairing this particular committee. I believe, before we do that, I believe Councillor England might want to say something as well.
Yes, I would like to, I'm substituting on this committee. Incredibly, this is the first time I've sat on this committee in 10 years as a councillor. but coincidentally, I declare an interest. I am the Decorum Borough Council Place portfolio holder. At Hertfordshire County Council, I'm the executive member for sustainability, and currently DVC's representative on the Children Conservation Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I also have a declaration of interest in relation to this item, as I know the applicant, so will regrettably be standing down. Thank you.
Councillor Guest, over to you.
Good evening, committee and members of the public. The first item on the agenda is Haresfoot Farm, Berkhamsted. And the case officer for this is James Gardner. So over to you when you're ready, James.
Right, thank you, Councillor Guest. This application is at committee due to the contrary views of Berkhamsted Town Council. Just first, starting with member updates, I'd like to draw members' attention to the addendum, which includes clarification on procedural matters, corrections and clarifications to the report, details of the revised development mix and the implications this has for contributions due to the County Council, the amendment to a number of conditions in order to allow the development to be phased, late representations from 2 local residents, and late comments from Hertfordshire Ecology, who raised no objections to the proposal. First slide, please. So since the publication of the addendum, further comments have been received from the Environment Agency, who have now removed their objection to the application, subject to the imposition of an appropriately worded condition. As such, the recommendation is to be changed in line with what is now on screen. Essentially just the first paragraph up there. Next slide, please. And this is the condition requested by the Environment Agency. Should members be minded to recommend approval, and it's recommended that the condition be added to the decision notice. Next slide, please. So just a further point to note. So it has been raised by a local resident in relation to the cumulative impact of developments. And there are developments proposed along Shooters Way, around 500 units in total. So I just want to take some time just to consider this and take members through this in detail. So, as stated in paragraph 116 of the NPPF, now on screen, development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation would be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios. Next slide, please. So the sites proposed to be allocated in the emerging plan could certainly be considered to be reasonable future scenarios. The sites proposed are BK01, land south of Berkhamsted, which members discussed and resolved to grant in November, BK02, the British Film Institute, and BK03, Haslam Fields. The approximate number of dwellings for each site are shown on screen there. Next slide, please. So, in addition to the proposed allocations, there are also 2 speculative applications currently with the council along Shooters Way. So at this stage, it appears unlikely that these will be approved due to a lack of viable SANG solution, although still ongoing discussions. Nevertheless, as such, these do not represent a reasonable future scenario of officers. Next slide, please. So just want to note that the applicant's transport consultant has provided a specific response to this issue of cumulative impact, full details of which are now available on the website. For the purpose of this meeting, though, I do want to briefly run through a summary of what the transport consultant said. So, essentially, Haresfoot Farm does already have planning permission for 86 dwellings. This application is looking at 130, an uplift of 44. The development of 44 units would not usually require junction modelling, but that has nevertheless been undertaken. The results show for both the 86 and the 130 units that all assessed junctions would operate well within capacity, with highways raising no objections. The Application references there are the speculative ones, and as mentioned previously, they're not being factored in. The BK02 and BK03 are draft allocations still under examination. This is from the transport consultant. Since they're not formally allocated, they would not normally be included in modelling, though background traffic growth was accounted for using Tempro growth factors. Now, Tempro is something that's been developed by the Department for Transport and works out estimates of growth in areas. Next slide, please. So the potential impact of BK01 has specifically been addressed in the addendum dated 13th of January, the transport addendum, and concluded there being an imperceptible effect on the most affected junction, the Chesham Road, Kingsway Hill roundabout. Nevertheless, the transport consultants have done additional analysis on BK1, 2 and 3, and looking at those BK01, BK02, BK03, 100 units each would generate about 90 vehicle trips in the AM peak hour combined. When these trips are added to future traffic scenarios, the Haresfoot 130 unit scheme traffic flows would only increase it by 0.3 to 2.8% at the affected roundabout, etc. So the conclusion remains that the development will cause no severe unacceptable cumulative impact on the highway network, consistent with the MPPF. And yes, and just the overall conclusion that the proposed 44 dwelling uplift would have an imperceptible impact on traffic, even considering potential future development sites. And HCC is not objected, and the transport assessment is considered to be robust and proportionate. Officers are in agreement with this approach. Turning to the next slide, then, just to remind members of the site. So it's outlined in red. The land surrounding the site is in the process of being transformed into a sang. As you can see there, the pathway is already in place, and expected to have the final inspection of that in the next few weeks, I would imagine, just to confirm everything's now been complete. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how the scheme has evolved. So I haven't shown there was a 61 unit scheme as well, but it's more relevant to show the 86. So the drawing on the top left relates to the application for 86 dwellings, which was subsequently allowed on appeal. And the drawing on the top right relates to the current application with the 86 unit scheme overlaid. It's to be noted that there would be very limited change to the layout of the area already consented. This slide shows the additional areas being developed as compared with the 86 unit scheme. Next slide, please. And is there one back? Sorry. And then this just shows the, it's just without any overlays on it, the proposed site layout. Okay, thank you. Right, so the building heights plan here. So just to run you through it, the purple denotes 1.5 story buildings, yellow denotes 1.75 story, blue 2 story, orange 2.5 story. So it's clear from the plan the tallest buildings have been concentrated in the centre of the site, while those on the periphery are largely 1.5 to 1.75 stories in height, ensuring that they respect the countryside edge. And some plans here showing some of the open space, including the SUDS features. Next slide, please. As with the previous iterations, the site is split into character areas. So here we can see the location of the farmstead, edge, and arrival yards indicated in yellow there on the map in the middle. And the courtyards there indicated too. And the mews, and the green spine that runs through the centre of the site and links into the community hub at the end. So whilst many of the designs are the same as before, the apartment blocks shown here are new. In the view of officers, they follow the design principles already set by the consented development and contribute positively to the development. And just some street scene views here. So the top street scene plan faces northwest, shows the entrance to the site between the two white buildings toward the right-hand side, and the bottom street scene plan facing to the southeast. Slide, please. Just a reminder that the community hub remains an integral part of the development, limiting the need for residents to travel and also offering the chance for social interaction and the fostering of community. As before, the pantry is to be included, precluding the need for residents to travel into town in order to purchase the day-to-day essentials such as milk, bread, tea, coffee, etc. And it's envisaged this will be through a vending machine process, but that specific detail is to be determined through the Section 106 agreement. And CGI here of the front of the development. And the green spine, the mews. And just moving on to the site photographs here, so this is the current entrance to the front of the site. And just a further look at the other side of the entrance. Front where the farmstead edge arrival yard would be. Looking towards the retained dwelling for the site there behind the green buildings. And just looking further through the site. With more traditional buildings within the site. Yeah, the old stable buildings. More of the commercial buildings. At the edge of the development there. The field was previously used for the Equestrian Centre. The current manege on the site. It's like this. Yeah, it looks like this. Right. Just one sec. Yeah, sorry. So just a few slides that weren't included, but I just want to refer to them. So just on the affordable housing point, there was a plan that showed that, but I'll just sort of verbally update you. So the 50% of the units on the site will be affordable. The tenures have been agreed as acceptable by the council's strategic housing team in that regard. Now, the affordable homes are to be fully integrated with the rest of the development and would be tenure blind. That is to say, they would be of the same high quality design as the rest of the dwellings on the development. I don't know if you can go back to the site layout plan, Connor, I can show roughly. So in the sort of top right-hand corner around there, you'd have affordable units there. And then sort of the more the bottom left around there, just up a bit, yeah, there would be affordable as well. So they are fully integrated into the to the site as a whole, which is welcomed. So in summary, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and the completion of a planning obligation under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act to secure the necessary mitigation for the Chiltern Beechwoods Special Area of Conservation, pursuant to the Chiltern Beechwoods Mitigation Strategy and other appropriate contributions and provisions to make the development acceptable in accordance with the development plan, NPPF, and any other material considerations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And before we move on, could you clarify as to whether the tilted balance applies to this application?
Yes, the tilted balance does apply to this application.
Thank you. And before I take speakers, and Councillor Stevens declared interest and withdrew from this item, and Councillors England and Jankowski also declared interest. So Lillian, could you clarify as to whether their interests are just personal, in which they can participate, or prejudicial, in which case they can't?
Sorry, can you confirm your interest?
I know the applicant in this case, so I've worked with them before.
Your what, sorry?
I know the applicant in this case.
Okay, so obviously you're not taking part in the voting.
No.
Yeah, that's fine.
My interest is that I have a role within the council, but I'm here tonight to listen to the evidence and I have an open mind.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that Councillor Jankowski won't be participating in this, but Councillor England is able to. So with that, I'll now call the speakers. So how we normally do it is speakers against the officer recommendation first, then speakers for the officer recommendation having a right to reply. And within that, we usually call members of the public, then town and parish councillors, then ward councillors. So we have members of the public to speak on this. We have Mr. Michael Bannister and Mr. Julian Davis. So Mr. Bannister and Mr. Davis, over to you when you're ready. It's 5 minutes between you, but we don't have one person speaking for 4 minutes, 50 seconds, the other person speaking for 10 seconds. Do give each other a fair crack of the whip.
Okay.
So over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I would like to refer you to section 9.115 of the agenda regarding the impact of fireworks on the horses at my stud farm. To give you some context, our facilities, including those which house pregnant mares, foals, are just over 100 metres to the northeast of this current 130 house proposal. The approved application for 86 houses is 250 metres away, so a significant difference. Given the prevailing wind in our direction, the sound will be amplified, but more importantly, send firework debris towards our buildings and the potential fire risk. A horse can hear up to 4 kilometres away and at frequencies that humans cannot detect. The noise of fireworks are equivalent to a jet engine taking off, and considering up to 130 households could be setting off fireworks at any one time, the planning officer takes a naive view that horses could merely be upset at a distance of 100 metres. The planning officer is not an expert in the field of horses or animal welfare, so his opinion is baseless. A British Horse Society document reported that mares aborting their pregnancy, horses and owners being injured, and horses being killed have all occurred as a result of fireworks. Not only does this constitute an animal welfare issue, but would seriously impact ourselves and our business, both emotionally and financially. There is an alternative by imposing condition for the use of silent fireworks, which, considering the countryside location and wildlife habitats in close proximity, would be a benefit for everyone. However, it's clear from the addendum that the planning officer is refusing to even consider such a condition for silent fireworks. It is an offence under the Animal Welfare Act 2006 to cause unnecessary suffering, which includes setting off fireworks near livestock or horses. Therefore, I am confused as to why the planning officer would not impose such a condition. Given the planning officer's position regarding fireworks, I urge the committee to reject the officer's recommendation and stop the development from extending 150 metres towards my property and horses. Thank you.
Well, first they came for the 86, which the DMC refused. Then they came for 61, which was allowed. Then they came back for the 86, which was allowed at appeal. Now they come for 130, which, where is this going to end? Are we being played by the applicant, Have they, as we speak, already prepared a letter of intention to appeal, just as they had on the Monday after the DMC approved 61 houses back in December 24? In a few weeks' time, we will have huge council tax bills landing on our doormats. I do wonder why I should pay it, only to see our views and objections swept aside and applications approved because of implied or real threat of appeal. The anger of Berkhamsted residents about the way these developments are being allowed was very evident at the recent PAC meeting organised by our MP, Victoria Collins. Planning officers deal with things at a technical level, but the DMC has a wider remit. It is time to support the people of Berkhamsted and its surrounding area, the people who live here, people who turn out at election time, not the large development companies who swan in to indiscriminately opportunise sites, spoiling, wrecking our towns and countryside. Coming in addition to this, around about 750 houses at South Berkhamsted, 200 along Shooters Way, 100 at Haslam Field, and others. Berkhamsted will become so chaotic and wrecked as a place to live. Its economy cannot support so many additional households. I have noticed some reluctance to allow these developments among DMC councillors, constrained as we are by the sloppily worded MPPF grey belt definition. Councils need to push back hard on the government over this. There are now real grounds to reject this application without fear. The 86 houses allowed at appeal is a sensible and legitimate point at which to draw a line. Anything more is unacceptably excessive. At nearly 1.5 times as big, the tilted balance is now heavily weighted against it. It is still inappropriate development in the green belt. At 130 houses, it has spilled out beyond the areas of degraded land and spoil that the appeal inspector considered to limit the encroachment into the green belt. It has got to stop here. We ask you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to time. I will now call Councillor Kevin Fielding from Berkhamsted Town Council, who's speaking against the application. Councillor Fielding, you press the silver button on the base unit, and you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
To quote the Decorum Officer's summary for Haresfoot Farm for this meeting, this site is located to the south of Berkhamsted and comprises a form of farm complex set within Greenbelt, in close proximity to the A41, accessed via a semi-rural track, White Hill. This is outside Berkhamsted. If this is approved, you're creating a new village in Chiltern Greenbelt. I cannot present all the reasons for objection to this site made by the Town Council in 3 minutes, but I will pick on 3 of the most serious issues. Firstly, lack of safety for the residents. It is envisaged that many of the journeys undertaken from this development, especially by children, will be by foot or electric bike to Berkhamsted. Apart from a poorly lit subway unsuitable for use to and from school in the winter and at night, the only way to Ashland School and town is via the main A41 junction roundabout and access road. Car traffic, previously travelling at 70 miles per hour, will be immediately faced with school pupils, cyclists and electric bikes. It also appears that paragraph 116 of the MPPF, including the cumulative effects of future development scenarios, has not been considered. The South Berkhamsted, Blegbury, Crudace, Haslam Fields, BFI and other developments all feed into this already busy and dangerous roundabout. Secondly, lack of infrastructure. For example, sewage. Apparently the plan for this development is to pump uphill and across the A41 to the manhole cover at the top of Kings Road in southern Berkhamsted. This system already has issues of sewage and surface runoff leaks at the bottom of the valley during times of heavy rain. The addition of sewage pumped up from the Haresfoot development can only exacerbate this problem and will result in further pollution of our town streets and into our rare chalk stream, the Bulbourne. Finally, lack of sustainability. Despite efforts to say otherwise, like the provision of free electric bikes, everyone must realise that the isolation of this community means that virtually all journeys, even those to local shops and schools, will be by car. This is not within Berkhamsted, and it is not a sustainable way to grow Berkhamsted. I therefore urge the committee to vote against this proposal. Why not allow Berkhamsted residents and the town council to develop the town in the way that they know best and oppose this isolated, unsafe, unsustainable new village in Chiltern Greenbelt. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to time. I'll now call Councillor Nigel Taylor, who's speaking in objection to the application. Councillor Taylor, as ward councillor, you have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Well, here we are again. Another planning committee and Haresfoot Farm is back on the agenda. This time it is not for 60 units, it is not for 80 units, but the grand total of 130 units. Why, you may ask, did they not ask for 130 units in the first place? Why have they been wasting the time of this committee, considering an application they have no intention of building? Is this the final application? Will they be back again in 6 months' time with a new application for 180 units? It is beginning to feel more like a game of darts than a serious attempt at town planning. Yet the fundamental position has not changed. It is the wrong development in the wrong place, and I ask you to reject it for the reasons I gave previously. The site is well outside the boundary of Berkhamsted, where development is discouraged by policy CS1 of the core strategy. The site is in Greenbelt. While part of the site may be classed as grey belt, it was a farm with a totally different characteristic to a housing estate. It is located on a single track road from Berkhamsted to Wimple Hill. I have driven this road many times and been stuck on it due to the volume of traffic coming the other way. It is incapable of handling more than a trickle of cars. The site is half a mile from the nearest A road. The nearest place for a bus stop is 1.9 miles from the nearest station, up a steep hill which no one is going to be cycling or walking. Access to schools is difficult. Both Ashridge and the nearest primary school are over a mile away by road. There are no local services on the estate or anywhere near it. Whatever the report says, it is a development designed for the car and will only make Decorum's traffic problems worse. Yet their love of the car is not so generous that they are prepared to pay the council to adopt the new roads. Instead, they are insisting on setting up a management company. This will result in the new residents being forced to pay twice for their roads, and the developer will be laughing all the way to the bank with the extra money they make from the residents. Decorum has published a sustainable transport study. It proposes improvements to the town's roads, but none of them can do anything to improve the capacity of the roads, which is at breaking point. The result is a familiar story, both in Berkhamsted and elsewhere in Decorum. A developer gets a bit of land on the edge of town, the active transport proposals are inadequate, everyone gets in their car, they drive their kids to school, they drive to the station. All routes go through the centre of town and we get gridlock. Then everyone complains about the traffic. This application could also set as precedent to expand the town further, and it will allow infill between it and the town. The precise thing that planning policy is meant to prevent. There is a shortage of social housing. However, the proposals for affordable housing would be for a discount on the market price. How many of these houses will be affordable on local wages? There is a valid point that there is a need for land for building. However, Decorum is in the process of producing a new local plan, and this site has not been included. Therefore, it should be rejected. It is not windfall, it's a hurricane. All councillors should recognise this situation. Where a developer like this has been built, residents then contact us and ask us to do something about the problems, which we cited as the reasons not to build there in the first place. This site is a prime example where we should not build a housing estate if we want to protect the green belt. If we want to protect it anywhere, we must protect it here. If not, it will set a development which will give developers a free hand to build anywhere they like, and then leave us to sort out the mess. Decorum has a responsibility to plan for the future, and it is said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Please reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and thank you for keeping to time. I'm now going to call two speakers for the office of recommendation. That's Mr. Oliver Myrance Wilson and Mr. Simon Warner. So, Mr. Myrance Wilson and Mr. Warner, you have 5 minutes between you when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and members, good evening. My name is Ollie Myrance Wilson, Land and Planning Director at Griggs Homes, one of the partners in Haresfoot Limited. I am joined this evening by Simon Warner of Warner Planning, and we speak on behalf of the applicant. Members will already be familiar with Haresfoot Farm, as the wider site benefits from existing permissions for 61 and 86 homes. Those decisions taken by both this council and the planning inspector have already firmly established that this is an appropriate site and location for residential development. Following changes in the MPPF, this application replaces the previous consent with a comprehensive and enhanced proposal for 130 homes, allowing the site to come forward in an efficient and landscape-led way. Importantly, the revised scheme significantly increases the public benefits of the development. The additional 44 homes introduced through this proposal include 31 additional affordable homes, bringing the overall provision to 50% affordable housing, equating to 71% of the additional unit numbers. The Section 106 contributions have increased by over 50% compared to the 86 dwelling scheme. The scheme continues to be landscape-led, with approximately 47% of the site provided as public open space, creating a generous green setting for the development. The design of the development has been carefully considered to integrate with this landscape setting. The council's design officer praised the concept and the way the homes create an active frontage onto the adjacent sand. The number of new trees to be planted across the site has increased to 376, and the development will increase biodiversity net gain entirely on site. The development is proposed at a modest density of approximately 19 dwellings per hectare, and alongside the homes, the proposal will also deliver a community hub, including a community pantry and shared amenities. Importantly, the additional homes will help ensure that they remain viable for the benefit of residents. The scheme also promotes sustainable travel through an increased shared electric bike scheme and an increased electric car club and the Hearts Links on-demand bus service. I will now hand over to my colleague Simon to address the planning considerations.
Thank you, Ollie, and good evening, members. It's been a pleasure working with your officers throughout the pre-application and application process. We believe their input has helped shape this high-quality proposal before you this evening. Members will be aware that Dacorum currently faces a significant housing shortage, with the borough able to demonstrate just over 1 year's housing land supply. Against that backdrop, the delivery of new homes carries substantial weight in the planning battlements, especially in the context of the stamp permissions and the allowed appeal. In policy terms, your officers have confirmed the site meets the definition of grey belt, as set out in the updated MPPF. Importantly, the proposal also meets the golden rules for development within grey belt locations, including the provision of 50% affordable housing, infrastructure improvements, and substantial high-quality open space. The updated MPPF states that development which complies with the golden rules should be given significant weight in favour of the grant of planning permission. As set out by Ollie, the scheme will also deliver substantial infrastructure contributions through Section 106 and SIL, supporting infrastructure to local transport infrastructure, schools, health, and community facilities. Members will recall that this committee recently approved a scheme at Chipperfield Road, Kings Langley. The committee agreed that the site comprised grey belt land and complied with the golden rules, such is the case here. Highways matters here have been carefully assessed. Updated traffic modelling has been undertaken, which considers both revised proposals and nearby developments, and this has been fully reviewed by Hertfordshire Highways, who raised no objection and confirmed that development will have an acceptable impact on local highways. Indeed, there are no technical objections from any of the statutory consultees, and the reference fireworks was considered in the appeal decision and rejected in paragraph 25 of the appeal. In planning terms, the scheme therefore fully accords with the MPPF and the development plan while delivering wider substantial benefits. We will regenerate a previously developed grey belt site, provide much needed housing and affordable homes, enhance biodiversity, the landscape, and deliver sustainable transport options. In conclusion, members, This is a well-presented and well-designed, sustainable, policy-compliant development which will deliver a wide range of benefits. For those reasons, we respectfully ask you to support your officer's comprehensive assessment and grant plan permission in accordance with the recommendation for approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to time. Now, before I throw the floor open to members, I would just like to ask the case officer. Before I throw the floor open to members, I'd like to check with the case officer. This application and am I right in thinking that the principle of residential development on this site has already been established?
Thank you, Councillor Guest. So, yeah, the answer is yes. The inspector stated that the site is suitable for housing. Now, that was on the basis of 86 units, but it's officers' view that whether it's 86 or 130, that doesn't change that conclusion. Essentially, the infrastructure being put in place previously proposed is still there, so it would allow safe travel to the town, to the schools, for the widening of the footpaths, provision of footpaths, reduction in the speed limit along the A416, etc. So yes, it's our view that it is a suitable site for housing.
Thank you, James. Now it's over to the committee for questions and comments. Any questions, comments? Councillor Madden.
Thank you. When the first application came in on this, I was one of the councillors that actually supported it at 86. And when it came back at the smaller amount, I was even happier. But when I saw it at 130, I've just been sitting here doing a spreadsheet. I was torn because I didn't like the idea of it being bigger, but when they said that half of it's going to be affordable housing, I thought, actually, yeah, we need affordable housing. We really desperately need affordable housing. But then I looked at the stats. Affordable, it's all very well talking in units, but on the original application that was approved on appeal, there were 34 affordable units, and 11 of the 34 were one-bed flats. That's not going to house a family, is it? And on the new one, there's 65 affordable units, but 23 of them are one-bed flats, 14 of them are two-bed flats. So if you've got a family and you want a garden, there are 13 two-bed houses, 12 three-bed houses, and only 3 four-bed houses. I've got families in my ward who have been waiting for a 4-bed house for years, and they're desperately overcrowded. And to be quite honest, I think this is an insult. I really think this is an insult to claim that they're doing all this wonderful work and all this affordable housing, and yet actually most of it's so tiny, it's not going to house a family. I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you. Councillor Hannell.
Chair, the Speaker makes a very interesting point about no fireworks, and I wonder if it's for this committee to be able to mandate an imposition of a no fireworks zone if we are minded to approve this application.
Okay, before I bring in Councillor Anderson, Lillian, would you be the person to, could this committee bring in a no fireworks condition, or would Phil and James be the people to answer that question?
Yes, we can answer that. So, Councillor Hannell, part of when we apply conditions, they need to be enforceable. That's one of the requirements. So, to be enforceable, we'd need to you need to be able to detect a breach, and you'd need to be able to know who'd caused the breach. So, if you had a development of 130 houses, someone lets off a firework, it would be extremely difficult for the enforcement officer going up there to find out who had set off that firework and to enforce against it. So, other conditions that would be enforceable would be, obvious and you can detect the breach. So appreciate the comment of the speaker and your question there, which is a good question, but it's not possible to impose that condition.
Thank you, James. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Could the officers agree with the observation that grey belt land is land where purposes C and E have been removed from the considerations, and that one is only considering purposes A, B and D? Is that correct?
So to meet the definition of grey belt, it needs to, you don't consider C and E, but when you're looking at whether it's appropriate grey belt development in 155, you then consider all the purposes and whether or not they'd be fundamentally undermined.
So you're saying purpose A means if a site was seen to conflict purpose A, then it wouldn't be grey belt?
Correct.
Would the officer agree, therefore, that as a result of the November's planning permission for south of Berkhamsted, that this site is actually now represents sprawl of Berkhamsted town, and therefore conflicts with purpose A, the green belt, and therefore isn't grey belt?
Well, I mean, sorry, at the moment, that application's not been approved. So at this present time...
No, sorry, the Chair, sorry to jump in. The decision was taken in November to grant permission for south of Berkhamsted between, it was variously called off Chesham Road, but I think the best name for it is South East Berkhamsted. So if you look at the map, you can see it's the infill between the existing town envelope and the A41. This development is on the other side of the A41, and therefore is it not the case that this actually represents sprawl of Berkhamsted?
Sorry, is the question separate from south of Berkhamsted? If we forget south of Berkhamsted, are you...
No, I'm saying because South Berkhamsted is now being permitted, does that not mean that this Haresfoot farm has now become, instead of being isolated in the countryside and therefore grey belt, it is no longer grey belt because it represents the sprawl of Berkhamsted?
Yeah, apologies, just one moment. Right, so in this case, I said that the site contributes moderately to purpose A. And just to give you sort of reference to the planning practice guidance, when it talks about moderate contribution, that's described as assessment areas that contribute moderately are likely to be adjacent or near to a large built-up area that include one or more features that weakens the land's contribution to this purpose, such as, but not limited to, having physical features in a reasonable proximity that could restrict and contain development, be partially enclosed by existing development, such that new development would not result in an incongruous pattern of development, contain existing development, or being subject to other urbanising influences. So in this case, we've got the sang around this site that restricts its sprawl going further, contains it. It's subject to the urbanising influence of the A41. So that's how we've got to this assessment here now, just to look at whether or not there's a strong contribution. So strong contribution will be free of existing development and lack physical features in reasonable proximity that could restrict and contain development. They also likely to include all the following features. So, for example, be adjacent or near a large built-up area if developed, result in an incongruous pattern of development, such an extended finger of development in the green belt. So, it's officers' view that the moderate contribution remains the case, notwithstanding South Berkhamsted. Obviously, the South Berkhamsted scheme, I don't believe, extends right up to the edge. There is a green space as well, but yeah, essentially going by the planning practice guidance, it would be officers' view that it would contribute moderately to Greenbelt Purpose A.
Which of course would then rule out the fact that that would basically mean, ergo, this is not grey belt land.
Well, no, if it moderately contributes, then it is grey belt. It's only if it strongly contributes to Purpose A that it wouldn't be grey belt.
I need to think a bit more. Thank you for now, Chair. I'll think about this a bit more.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, whilst you're thinking, I'll call Councillor Bromham, then Councillor Smith-Wright, then Councillor Hobson.
I've got two questions, but firstly, going back to the issue of the stud farm and the sensitivity to loud noises, yeah, I agree that bylaws and that sort of thing are very difficult to enforce, but there may well be a management company on this estate, and they often give information and even impose restrictions on the residents on that estate. Is there some way that we could pass on a requirement for the management company to make the residents aware, at least, of that sensitivity to loud noises?
I think we could do an informative on a decision notice, which strongly recommended that in the being good neighbours, that there would be certain procedures if people were to to want to sell fireworks. I don't believe that would be enforceable from the council's perspective, but that's something that certainly could be put forward to any future management company, and it would obviously be hoped that they would want to have good relations with neighbours.
Thank you. I think such things are often self-enforcing if people know what they're supposed to do.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith-Wright, then Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sustainable transport. Usually it means the development is designed so people do not need to rely on private cars for everyday trips. So ideally there should be a primary school, a local shop, a local GP, park and play areas. I'm just concerned how sustainable this is. I'm very concerned with the road, the A41 road that comes into that dangerous roundabout with children walking across to school, to Ashlands. It's not I don't see it as a sustainable transport estate. I appreciate the car sharing and the bus stop and Hearts link, but I would question if this is a site that advocates sustainable transport. I'd just like your comment, James. Thanks.
Certainly. Yes, so I mean, paragraph 110 of the NPPF talks about opportunities to maximise sustainable transport will vary between urban and rural areas. So I'm not going to sort of sit here and say it's the most sustainable development in the world. There's no train station there. Obviously, you have to walk into town. So, but what I would say is it's made the best of the situation and maximised the opportunities. So, for example, the off-site highway works are substantial and include pedestrian crossings, so you would be able to get safely across. You would cross over to the other side of the road as you walk along Chesham Road, so you're away from that roundabout with the A41 slip road. That's all in the appendix to the transport assessment, so and that would be required to be in place prior to any occupation of the development. So it's, as you mentioned, the Hearts Links, there's additional car club now, given the increase in numbers, the electric bicycles. So will people walk to the train station every day? Probably not. But there is the opportunity to do so. And on a nice day, if you're not in a rush, you may well walk into Berkhamsted, especially, obviously, people have mentioned the traffic is bad, then it's a nice day, you're more likely to probably walk. So, it is about maximising it, and in officers' view and the view of Hertfordshire Highways, that's what's happened here. So you're never going to stop all those car trips, but certainly having the pantry on site, the community hub where you can do work from home or have your child's birthday party, etc. They kind of offer a possible option. Whether people choose to take them up is another matter, but I believe that that's according with what the NPPF requires, and obviously having regard to the inspector's decision, which is the material consideration. I think it would be quite challenging to now say the site isn't sustainable for 130 units.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson, then Councillor England.
Thank you, Chair. This is yet another example of just how unsatisfactory the planning system is, and the very limited leeway that we have, particularly with the way that the planning legislation is going, to actually be able to execute the will of the people, if you like. Our hands are unfortunately tied, and they seem to be further tied on this. I've just looked at the reasons we turned down the 86 that was overturned on appeal. And one was, do jump in, officers and others, if I've misunderstood, but the first one is that it's inappropriate building in the Greenbelt. And the second one is that it's too far from Berkhamsted and the shops. And I think both of those reasons have been, in being overturned on appeal, my interpretation is that those two reasons wouldn't stand up again if they were our reasons for turning down the extension. One of the reasons for saying unsatisfactory is that I do actually agree and have lots of sympathy with the residents and Berkhamsted Town Council that this is an encroachment, and I do take issue with the developers saying that that this is a more efficient use of the site. It's clearly only really in their interest and not in the interest of the people of Berkhamsted and Dacorum that this site is extended. So I found that a bit annoying, really. I also find unsatisfactory, and I have said this many times in this committee, that even though residents and councillors are familiar with the area, know that the additional transport and know that the narrow lanes are unsuitable for a development of this size, 86 or bigger, because the experts in transport have said that they have no issues. That again, unfortunately, our views do not carry weight if this was to go to appeal. So I'm really struggling here. In principle, I don't actually have a problem in principle with building on this site, but I am not very happy with the way that these applications have continued to come in. But I am struggling, particularly given the reasons that we gave last time and the appeal decision and the situation that we're in. And I think we've gone beyond whether this is green belt or grey belt because of that reason was overturned in appeal. That I'm really struggling to find a reason to, in terms of material planning reasons, to turn it down. I am very sympathetic to the horses nearby, and it is a shame that we can't. I've read appeal decision while people were talking, and it is correct that paragraph 25 says that it's not it's not a convenient or a reasonable thing to put in, even though no one wants any horses hurt by this. So, in general, to conclude, I'm struggling actually, and I will continue to struggle until we come to the vote. I do just have one question, which was I can't find anywhere. I've been searching while people have been talking. Were costs awarded when the appeal was allowed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. So the answer is no, costs weren't allowed, but there was the discussion with, we didn't contest the appeal, so there was that agreement essentially that there wouldn't be costs awarded if we didn't contest it as the council, having it brought it back to members and gotten your approval from that point. Just one other point I want to mention on about the increase in the numbers. So 86 came in originally, but as background, there was pre-app before that, and they were working at more than that, 100. Pushback said no, because obviously that was at that time no greater impact on the openness of the green belt. It was a different test, and what essentially happened between the 86 or the 60, 86 was refused, the 61 was approved. The 86 went to appeal, but in the interim, we had the new NPPF, which then brought in grey belt, hence the 130. So in answer to the question, why didn't they come in for 130 originally, it wouldn't have been accepted and would have been refused because it would have been inappropriate development. So the policy environment's kind of moved on since the original discussions.
But may I come back, Chair, please?
You certainly may.
Thank you. So this is where we've got residents that have spent a lot of time working on this. We've had emails with very well thought out and considered views, but I'm just really struggling to find a way to support that in the policy environment that you've just summarised there with the government. So yeah, I'm just I'm not happy. I'm unhappy, but and I will consider my position until we get to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I bring in Councillor England, I see that Phil's got his hand out.
Yeah, thank
Phil.
you. Just wanted to comment on the point about the more efficient use of the site. And obviously, there are more houses. There will be a commercial element, of course, but there is also a more efficient use of the site. In density terms, this scheme remains a relatively low dense scheme, but it is a higher density than the previous schemes. But it maintains the quantum of open space, the proportions. There are more trees, and it's also more efficient in terms of the use of those community facilities. So I think when the applicants were describing more efficient use of the site, it was in those terms.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Just trying to reflect.
Thank you. Whilst you reflect on Councillor Hobson, I'll bring in Councillor England.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as I mentioned before, I have not sat on this committee before, this is my first experience of trying to weigh the evidence and hearing from members of the public, hearing from the applicants, and layering that over on to the awareness that I have of the changes in planning policy, which are changing very, very quickly at the moment.
Councillor England, could you get to the point, please?
Thank you, Chair. I will. I haven't actually spoken for very long, in comparison with perhaps some others, but I will. Clearly, there is the grey belt issue. I'm listening very much to Councillor Hobson, who I know has got a lot of experience here, and I can see how she is struggling with the circumstances that we are making this decision in. versus the wish to listen to what people have got to say, people who live nearby. I think on the horses point, the question that came to my mind is if the horses can hear something very loud that's 100 metres away, but they can hear things which are 4 kilometres or 4 miles away, then I'm not sure where you can keep horses anywhere near Berkhamsted, presuming that the good people of Berkhamsted sometimes use fireworks. This is a farm within Greenbelt, but it is a previously developed space, and it seems to me that if you bear in mind that this is a development in the context of lots of other developments which are happening and are going to happen, then if we can sensibly use density where development looks as if it's likely to happen, then that plays its part in the land supply, and it plays its part in alleviating the burden on other residents yet to come who will find themselves sitting over there wondering why the council is making a decision it's making. So the point I'm making is that there is a virtue in a little bit of extra density here, not because it's good for the site where it is right here, right now, but because it has bearing on, you know, future sites anywhere near Berkhamsted which may come forward. Trying to move swiftly along, but bear in mind the notes that I've been making copiously. I'm not very happy with the sustainable transport situation. It seems to me that making a virtue of a bus stop, which is half a kilometre away, is pushing things a little bit. I do see that there are plans to improve the pedestrian access, which will alleviate some of the safety concerns. And I hear also that the speed limit is going to be addressed, and that also, I think, weighs. I think it's good that there is more developer contribution coming forward. I'm not surprised that there is. I also think that it's good that we've got more affordable housing, albeit it's affordable in inverted commas because it's nowhere near affordable for people who live and work locally. I have a question to finish, I think, which is regarding the position in the context of the Sang. If I was being attracted to go and use some suitable alternative natural green space where I would find myself walking around a farm, I would be quite attracted by that. I would think this is nice, I'm in the countryside. I'm not very far from Berkhamsted, but I'm in the countryside and there's a farm. If I was walking in the same Sang and I was walking around housing estates, then I might not really feel that I was getting that suitable alternative natural green space. Does this development have any bearing on the status of the Sang? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine, that one there. Yes, so we did actually consider very carefully the impact on the Sang because it's meant to be free from unnatural intrusions in the sort of criteria for natural England. So you see there already was a development approved for 86 units. This does bring it closer to the sort of southern boundary with that. This did lead to, when we had discussions with the developers prior to the submission of this application, there were proposed buildings with their gardens backing directly onto the Sang, which wasn't deemed acceptable because you get sheds and residential paraphernalia, which would have been an intrusion into it. So the approach now is that you have the fronts of the properties onto the Sang. They are still set back from the boundary. There's planting within the site. There's also planting on the Sang side as well. So that would provide a good level of screening between the development. So it really is the southeastern boundary where you're going to have the impact. Obviously on the northeastern side, it's set further away there. So we went through this process. Natural England haven't raised any objections to it on this basis, and obviously as it currently stands, it's not a farm, it's really just a commercial site. So in some ways the housing would arguably be an improvement on what's there at the moment, which is sort of a commercial buildings, large utilitarian buildings. So yeah, the view of officers is that we have considered it, and in our view, it wouldn't cause that level of harm that it would affect the integrity of the saying.
Thank you, James. We have been discussing this item for over an hour. I see that Councillor Bromham, Councillor Anderson and Councillor Hannell have got the buttons on for the second bite of the cherry. So I'll only bring you in if you've got something new to contribute to the committee, not to go over old ground. On that basis, Councillor Bromham, only if you're bringing something new to the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I do feel a slight deja vu with this point, but I am quite aware of health and safety and refuse collection both being in my portfolio. Now, there is a guidance note for refuse collection and design guidelines for new builds, and that does say that reversing of lorries is quite dangerous, and ideally new estates should be designed so that the lorry can drive forwards all the way through. And I have seen on some new developments that they have incorporated that sort of loop design, and I wonder why that hasn't been done here and whether it's possible. There seems to be, it almost joins up next to the community centre, and I wonder whether it could do that to avoid those safety risks. And that would also enable a one-way system around much of the estate.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bromham. And yes, I'm familiar with the guidance, and you're right, the use of loop roads is encouraged. I mean, I think ultimately it was about trying to make this as pedestrian friendly as possible. And if you have the loop road, then cars can go through at the moment you've got the cul-de-sacs, and it kind of is a more conducive environment for, perhaps children to be playing out in the road. Because you have a limited number of cars going round, and you wouldn't want to necessarily come up or a rat run going round. So the design, though, has incorporated adequate turning for the refuse freighter in appropriate locations, and that's in this swept path analysis and the transport assessment. I take your point that obviously it's not ideal, and there's an element of danger associated with reversing. But I think it's, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the application before us is the one without the loop roads. Could it have been put in at the beginning? Maybe, but it would have potentially diluted the design of the site, and those quiet roads would become a bit more busy. So, yeah, it was considered, but ultimately we've gone for this approach.
Yeah, thank you. I would hope that these things could be taken into account earlier on, and I don't really think that having a loop design would actually increase the volume of traffic significantly.
Thank you, Councillor Bromham and Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think from comments it's quite clear that a substantial number of members of the committee have a number of issues with this scheme proposed. I, for one, certainly agree with the problems about the country lanes, particularly to the south of the site, along White Hill towards Welpley Hill. And the fact that it is a very remote site from Berkhamsted, and I do take on board the comments about having to use White Hill and then the junction over the A41, which just seems bizarre. I've heard the comments that Councillor Madden said about the affordable, the range of affordable housing provision, and I've also thought more about my issue about the change in the green belt situation. But the problem is with all of these issues is that we have to focus on what's different between the 130 and the 86 scheme. The principal development has been set. The 86 scheme has been granted permission, and any refusal that this committee passed would have to focus explicitly on the difference between the 130 and the 86, which nobody has said, and I think is actually quite crucial to our decision this evening. So there's no change in the footprint in the site, so bang goes the idea of trying to talk about the fact it's not grey belt anymore. The sustainability in the traffic situation was well and truly considered during the appeal decision. And I think, you know, it is a little bit like a mouse nibbling away at a bit of cheese. And we're just going to see more and more houses. But unfortunately, with the system and the policies that we have to work to, I just cannot see any reason by which the committee can disagree with regret, can disagree with the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Hannell, I see you've switched your light off. So have you worked out that you haven't got a new contribution to bring?
Chair, I was going to just have another go at the issue of fireworks and sky lanterns, which can not only cause injury to horses but on livestock, but also can be the catalyst for fires in remote farm outbuildings. And I'm minded not to get memory mixed up with history because I wasn't around, but in 1946, quite patronising guidance was issued to Londoners coming to Hemel Hempstead in huge numbers, telling them that they were now living by farmland and they were expected to be neighbourly and be mindful of where they were now living. I'm not expecting to put patronising language into 2026 correspondence, but I do think that to remind residents that they are living near farmland and that they are expected to be neighbourly and not set off fireworks and not release sky lanterns because these cause damage to livestock and remote farm buildings.
Thank you, Councillor Hannell. And James, am I right in thinking that's been covered by the informative that you mentioned?
That's correct, yes.
Well, now comes to the vote. The officer recommendation is to delegate with a view to approval. So is there a proposer for the officer recommendation? Proposer in Councillor England. Is there a seconder for the officer recommendation? Councillor Williams. So, all in favour of the officer recommendation, please raise your hands. All against the officer recommendation and all abstain. So, all against, please raise your hands. And abstentions. So the officer recommendation to delegate with a view to approval is passed. And I'll now relinquish the chair to Councillor Stevens for the next item.
Right. Members? Shall we move on? We're on item 5B, which is Ashridge House, change of use to repurpose 206 rooms, etc. James, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Can you just go to the first slide, please, Colin? So, members may recall this came to committee back in January, and it was delegated with a view to approval subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure a number of mitigation factors due to the proximity of the hotel or the building to the Chiltern Beechwood SAC. So we've gone away, been talking with the applicants and the lawyers, and essentially it's come to pass that we don't need the legal agreement and it can be done by condition now. So tonight we're coming back to members simply to get consent to do it via condition, to secure those factors via condition rather than legal agreement. And that's generally good practice. If you can do it by condition rather than legal agreement, it saves costs for all parties, etc. So everything is staying the same as what members voted on back in January. It's simply the mechanism for getting that mitigation in place. So that's what we're seeking tonight, that amended resolution. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Councillor Anderson.
Move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a second there for officer? Oh, right. Councillor Madden got there first. Right. So we have a proposer, Councillor Anderson, a second, and Councillor Madden. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? 7, 8, 9, 12. 12 in favour, right. No an objection, and I'm abstaining, right. Right. James, thank you. Right, moving on to item 5C. Change of use from agricultural to mixed agricultural equestrian use in Little Gaddesden. The case officer is Robert Freeman. Over to you, Robert.
Garrick, sorry. Can I just, I am the county councillor for Little Gaddesden, but I will go forward with an open mind, if that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application before members tonight is for a change of use of land at land off Church Road, Little Gaddesden. It is one of a number of plots, 4 plots in total that have been applied for in this instance, and it's part of a wider area of 17 plots subject to an Article 4 direction. So therefore, owning pasture fields on the south-eastern side of Church Road. And the recommendation before you is to refuse planning permission for the change of use, given the adverse impact this would have on the Little Gaddesden Conservation Area, the setting of the listed building at St Peter and Paul's Church, and the impact it would have on the character and appearance of the countryside. So the application site is outlined in red on the plan before you. There is an existing hedgerow that runs through the middle of that site with footpath connections both between the Church Road and down towards Hudnall, extending on the north-eastern side, and between that, the rear of that plot and the centre of the village of Little Gaddesden itself, further to the south-west. Next slide, please. So this is the aerial photograph. As you can see, you've got the Bowls Club, effectively, and the hall on to the south of the site and the car park associated with that. But the site itself does not contain an access. And effectively you've got the public footpaths, as you can see, quite heavily worn in terms of that aerial photograph. Next slide, Colin. So the proposals before you. So this is the view down Church Road. So you've got the car park on the left-hand side there, Church Road extending up towards the church, and immediately on looking a bit further along there, you've got that established tree line. And as you can see, this is quite a wide open swathe of grassland, effectively providing the setting of the village on that side. Next slide, please. Moving along, you've got obviously the hedgerow that's been put in place, and on plots E and F, which are on the far side of that hedgerow, you've got the beginnings of equestrian development creeping in there, and previously subject to enforcement proceedings. You can see behind there you've got field shelters effectively. Just to clarify to members, this application is not actually for the field shelters. Field shelters are claimed not to be development. We do have concerns with that. Next slide. And again, that's a bit further along, so you're extending up towards the church itself. So it really is, you know, a beautiful area of the countryside, and a very important setting of the children's area of children's landscape. These are the field shelters in question, obviously associated with the change of use of the land. To our part, this is, in our view, integral to the use of the land for equestrian purposes, and one of the reasons we've got concerns with the impact upon the character and appearance of the area. So it's not necessarily that the change of use is that harmful, it's everything else that comes alongside equestrian use. The shelters themselves are on metal skids. Arguably, they can be dragged around the site, so they are not permanent structures. But in this instance, that these haven't moved for a substantial period of time, and they are, you know, very large in terms of their scale. And again, that's the field shelter. It's one of the field shelters that's been constructed. In addition to that, you've also got the beginnings of what appears to be kind of drainage ditch being introduced, which is again another concern for us. That's not shown on the application in any way of form. So obviously I think that concludes the presentation on this one, and quite clearly highlights what our concerns are with regards to the impact on the area. Got it. Thank you.
Right, members, over to you. Questions? I've got Councillor Hobson and then Councillor Jankowski, and then Councillor Smith-Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Just so I think that was a very succinct description of reasons for the decision, and at the appropriate time, I'm happy to move officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll park that for the moment. Councillor Jankowski.
Just a quick question. I'm slightly confused, and I see the constituent comment from the parish council as well around sort of land ownership and looking at the sort of red line boundary. It does seem a bit odd. I just wondered if you could clarify that.
Yeah, so the plan up on the screen is actually an amended plan, which updated to reflect the red outline and where the actual works were occurring. It was initially shown to be further to the south west of the site, and we pointed out that that was inaccurate at the time. As I say, in terms of the wider context, you've got effectively between the edge of the Bowls Club and heading up towards the church, you've got 17 plots there that have been marketed for sale. And obviously back in, I think it was 2008, we put in a Particle 4 direction in place to prevent subdivision of that build. We've subsequently been dealing with this application for you know, the change of use of the land, for the provision of buildings, changes of buildings on that site. And at each stage, we've taken appropriate enforcement action and refused planning applications to develop. So that's kind of the background on this one.
Yes, I mean, this is a very special piece of land, and whatever goes there must be really well thought out. And without a doubt, I think the officers have made the absolutely right decision, so I would fully support it.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair.
And then Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chair. I've carefully considered the officer's report and the issues that are relevant to the actual application in front of us, and move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. And what colleagues have said has been what I was going to say, so I'm not going to say anything else, but Councillor Hobson, I believe, moved the officer recommendation. So on that basis, wouldn't Councillor Anderson be seconding it?
Been demoted, Chair.
Right, so Councillor Hobson, in fact, got there first, early on, right? So Councillor Anderson is seconding it. Sorry about that, Councillor Anderson. Are there any further comments? If not, can I have a show of hands, those in favour of officer's recommendation? 6, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13. 13? Right, okay, right. Thank you. I'm abstaining, yes. We're on to 5D. Heather, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted just to start by clarifying the background on this application and why the case is being re-presented to members. So the application was presented at committee on the 8th of January and sought permission for the demolition of existing buildings and structures and for the redevelopment of the site for storage and distribution use. Members resolved to approve the application with a recommendation that permission be delegated with a view to approval, subject to overcoming the outstanding objection of the lead local flood authority. During the debate, a concern was raised regarding the height of storage materials on the site, and officers agreed to restrict this via condition. So condition 18 was added, restricting the height of storage materials to 3 metres when sited along or within 5 metres of the site boundary and 4 metres when elsewhere. So the developer has since argued that this condition would make the scheme unviable, and they've carried out further work to assess the visibility of storage materials. And permission is now sought to amend the wording of this condition for the storage heights materials to be no higher than 6 metres in the front yard and no higher than 6.75 metres in the rear yard. And I'd also like to just draw members' attention to the addendum. So the LLFA have since removed their objection to the scheme and subject to 5 conditions which are set out in the addendum. And it's therefore recommended that the application be granted subject to the rewording of condition 18, the conditions set out in section 11 of the original report, and the additional LLFA conditions. Will you just move on to the next slide, please? So this slide just shows the site location plan. So you can see the site currently comprises a garden centre and associated retail uses, and it's situated off Leighton Buzzard Road. The site's within the green belt. The Chilterns National Landscape is approximately 750 metres away to the north of the site, and the River Gade and a wildlife site are immediately to the rear. You can move to the next slide, please. So this slide just shows the wider site context and the relationship between the site and the land west of Leighton Buzzard Road appeal. which granted approval for 390 dwellings and a residential care home with associated landscaping, open space and access. And that site is shown in blue and the application site is shown in red. If we move to the next slide, please. So here you can see the existing site plans. The site sits between the UK Power Network facility to the southeast and a farmyard complex to the northwest. Rivergate is immediately to the rear. So the existing structures have been numbered on the plan. It includes greenhouses, storage buildings. It's worth noting that ground levels fall steeply away from Leighton Buzzard Road to the rear. Slide. So this slide just shows a proposed site plan. So all existing structures would be demolished and replaced by a single detached structure. So the building would be served by yards to the front and rear, which you can see on this plan, both of which would be used to store materials in connection with the storage and distribution use of the site. And you can also see that additional soft landscaping would be introduced onto the site along the site boundaries to soften the visual appearance of the development. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are just included for reference. They show the building that would be installed on the site. There's no changes proposed as part of this addendum, but again, it's just included for reference. So you can see the front and side elevations on this plan. Next slide, please. The side and rear elevations on this plan. Next slide. The floor plans. Then we've got the roof plan. So the key issue with storage materials being sited within the front and rear yards of the site relate to the visual impact and the potential for the additions to be viewed from public vantage points outside of the site and within the Chilterns National Landscape. And this is why Condition 18 sought to restrict these heights. So analysis has been undertaken to identify these key vantage points, and this is referred to as the zones of theoretical visibility, which is what you can see on the screen. So the dark blue hatched areas show the potential visibility of the building with the consented storage materials, whilst the light blue areas show the potential visibility of storage materials with the increased heights. The next few slides just show further analysis on this. So on the previous slide, you could see that this site could theoretically be visible from the Chilterns National Landscape. But as you can see from this image, the site is not visible from any public vantage points within the Chilterns National Landscape. We can move on to the next slide. So the two key vantage points at which the storage materials would be visible are photo viewpoint 3, which looks towards the site from the footpath to the rear, and photo viewpoint 7, which is looking at the site from Leighton Buzzard Road, which is to the front of the site. So this slide just shows existing views from that photo viewpoint 3. So this is looking towards the site from the rear. So you can see the site in the middle of the screen. You can see that the development site is highly visible through an existing gap in vegetation along that rear site boundary. Next slide. So this slide just shows a visual of the site with the new building. So storage materials would be sited within the rear yard and would be subject under the new condition to a restricted height of no more than 6.75 metres in this context. So it would match the height of the building, which you can see in the image, the first image. So whilst there would be some visual harm from this in the short term, this harm would lessen over time with the infilling of the gap with soft landscaping, which would screen the development, which you can see in the bottom image. We just move on to the next slide. So this slide just shows photo viewpoint 7. So this is looking towards the front of the site from Leighton Buzzard Road. So you can see that the site is currently highly prominent in existing views. And on this slide, you can see the analysis. So materials in the front yard would be restricted to a maximum 6 metre height under the reworded condition. So views of these additions would largely be filtered by way of the new landscaping to the front of the site. And whilst the new landscape buffer would take time to establish, it would be an area that would be bolstered with larger tree stock from year one, so semi-mature native trees, which would just help to strengthen that screening of the materials within the front yard from an early stage of the development. You can see what the outcome would be in the second image. So the next few slides just show photos. So image A shows views of the main garden centre building and an existing temporary structure. And image B is just facing towards the rear. So again, you can see the gap in the soft planting and the river gate. Again, just further site photos. So you can see image C shows the existing gap in vegetation to the rear of the site looking towards the River Gate and that public footpath. And image D shows the greenhouses and the obscure view of the main garden centre building. Then we've got image E just showing views of the hard standing area to the rear of the site, which currently provides parking for the garden centre, but would be repurposed to create that rear yard. And image F shows views of the front of the site. So if we can move on to the last slide. Thank you. So on the basis of the additional assessment, it's concluded that the increase in the height of storage materials within the front and rear yards would be acceptable and would not cause a significant level of visual harm. It is therefore recommended that the application be granted subject to the rewording of condition 18, the conditions set out in section 11 of the original report and the additional LLFA conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Members, over to you. Comments? Questions?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to ask about the River Gate, which is obviously so valuable for wildlife, and the buffer zone and the planting. Could it, you say native species, but a hedgerow, decent hedgerow would actually be the best option rather than, if we could specify a hedgerow, rather than native species. And what are they keeping in the containers? Do we know?
No, so we don't have any details on what would be stored on the site. It's just open as a storage and distribution site. In terms of the soft landscaping, that would be secured by condition. So at this stage, we don't have these specific details on exactly what would be planted. That would be subject to condition, and we would secure it at that stage.
That's fine, because we can't have any toxic materials going into the River Gate. So if it's storing non-toxic materials, that's fine. Thanks.
Chair, on page 186, 4.22, I just wonder how the intention to support existing employees to alternative garden centres within the chain is going.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of details on how this would work because the application is still ongoing, is my assumption on this. But again, there have been attempts to move people within the chain so that there wouldn't be a significant loss of jobs. But regardless, it is felt that the benefits of the scheme would outweigh any harm that would come from any loss of jobs as a result of the proposal.
It just understood that the net benefit wouldn't be felt to the current employee. And I just think that it was the intention of that garden centre to redeploy as many people as possible to other sites. And I just wonder if the council can just keep an eye on that intention, because it's an other matter, but certainly for the individuals concerned, it's extremely important.
Point taken. I think we've got some portfolio holders here who might be able to take a view on that. Councillor Madden.
Thank you. Heather, can we look at the two pictures of, there was a screen that had two pictures of the front entrance, please? That one, thank you. Is there any indication of how many years it will be before those, before the trees that are planted end up as, at full size?
I don't think there's a confirmation on exactly how many years it would take for it to grow to that level. They have mentioned that they'd obviously add mature trees as part of the early stages so that it would help with the screening. But yeah, I don't have details on how long it would take to become as established as that image.
Obviously, weather is a big factor in that, but It's just like, that could take 40 years. It's a long time. That could be redeveloped for something else before the trees actually do screen it. That's my point.
Yeah, I think it's, as I understand it, Heather, the exact tree species is to be determined through the landscaping plan, but it is to be semi-mature trees, which are obviously at a more advanced stage of growth, so would typically be at least 4.5 metres, so 4.5 metres, could even go up to 6 metres depending on the semi-mature tree. So I think certainly the intention is to have that immediate impact by not planting saplings. These will be substantial semi-mature trees.
Right, I've got Councillor Guest and then Councillor England.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Smith-Wright's concerns about toxic materials leaching into the River Gade can be addressed by looking at conditions 4 and 5 on page 188 of the reports pack.
Councillor England.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I can help the committee a little bit by observing that the trees that are big in the lower picture appear to be the same trees which are a bit smaller in the top picture, in which case they might already exist and we might know what species they are. I don't know. I don't know if that's a real picture or if that's more CGI than I was expecting.
Yeah, I think there's CGI images to give you an idea of what it could look like. The idea is that you would move away from the first image. So instead of just planting young trees, you'd plant mature trees to provide that kind of instant impact with the screening. That's what the image is supposed to show. But again, the planting details would come later via the condition.
Okay, that's understood. Perhaps I won't be invited back, but I was confused by the previous one, which indicated that, or the other aspects of the picture, which indicated things which are there now. But yeah, okay. So so clearly, those are not existing trees.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one briefly to make an observation that when looking at the landscape and the screening from a distance, I think the most dominant thing on the landscape are the pylons and the electricity station next to it. So I don't think we need to get our knickers in too much of a twist about the landscaping on this, and I'm happy to. If I may, apologies to anyone that wanted to move officer's recommendation again. I'm just obviously power mad this evening, but I'm happy to do that when it comes to the appropriate time. Thank you.
It's happened.
I think you've stolen Councillor Anderson's thunder here.
It's happened again, Chair. I was just going to make a brief remark that if you look at Google Maps, the boundary at the bottom of the site abutting the River Gade is shown as mature trees. So I'm just wondering whether some of the trees have actually been taken down recently. I hope not. But I do take the point that the site is screened, and the Councillor Hobson's mentioned the pylons next door, so I'm happy to second recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Are there any further comments? Right, well, if there are no further comments, we've got a proposer by Councillor Hobson for officer's recommendation. We've got Councillor Anderson seconding. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour of officer's recommendation, please? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7. Yep. 12. 12 in favour, none against, 1 abstention. Officer's recommendation is carried. Thank you. Moving on, item 5E, which is the LDP use of a C3 dwelling house as a C2 children's home. And I've got Councillor Hannell wishing to make a declaration?
Chair, I wish to recuse myself from the committee on this particular point because I'm speaking in objection, so I'll move to the other side of the bar.
It would be possible for you to stay there and make the speech from there. We'll assume you won't be voting.
Fair enough, thank you. Oh, you don't know what you're missing. Come on.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see, the application is for a change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a C2 children's home, and the application is for a lawful development certificate. So we're considering whether a material change of use that requires planning permission would be occurring. I'd refer councillors to the addendum with Councillor Hannell's representation and my response to that contained in there. And I'd just also like to point out that last year in February, the council did grant a very similar lawful development certificate. The only changes between that one and this one is that there's a slight change in the age. So now it's 11, 3 children aged between 11 and 16, whereas last year it was 12 and 16. And within the information the applicant has submitted, the shift changeover times have changed from a previous 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. to just 10 a.m. And there is a slight change in the description in terms of how the visitors and the visitor management systems are referred to. So these are just the site locations. On the left, the site location plan, it's a 2-storey, 4-bedroom dwelling, detached dwelling on the end of the cul-de-sac. And you've got a satellite image on the right-hand side there. Again, just an existing site plan. These are the existing elevations. The top left there is the front elevation. Below it is the rear elevation, and on the right-hand side, you have the 2 side elevations. And these are proposed elevations. All these are showing that there aren't any sort of external works proposed to the dwelling to facilitate the new use. There are, however, some internal alterations. So again, these are the existing floor plans. So 4-bedroom property, and a shared living dining room area, conservatory and garage, kitchen. And these are the proposed floor plans, so relatively the same, but some of the alterations include a new shower room on the first floor in combination with the existing bathroom, and there's a new office staff restroom on the ground floor, but you can see a sort of shared living dining area is retained within the property. These are the site photos. So this is just the front of the property. This is the rear of that conservatory. That's that shared sort of living area. So there would be an office put in where the photo is taken from. That's just the conservatory. And that's just a property. The property in question is just here, if you can see my cursor. Again, this is just a further view. The property in question is just over here, so we're looking down the road. And yeah, the application is recommended that the lawful development certificate is granted on the basis that a material change of use would not be occurring. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Are we ready for Councillor Hannell? Over to you.
Chair, I'm speaking in opposition to the planning application number 12 on Glebe Close, a cul-de-sac in my constituency of Bennetts End. For transparency, as a member of this committee, I've recused myself from the final item. I'm speaking on behalf of many concerned residents as their ward councillor. I want to firstly start off by making something absolutely clear. This is not about opposing the principle of care for vulnerable children in our borough. We all recognise the importance of providing a safe, stable home for young people in need. That fact is not in dispute here. The issue before us is a planning one, specifically whether the proposed use in its practical operation and consequences represent a material change in character of the property, and whether the approach being taken sets a precedent that materially alters how similar applications will be treated in the future. The application seeks a lawful development certificate on the basis that proposed C2 use would not constitute development requiring planning permission. Officers have advised that they are minded to grant the certificate. However, residents' concerns and my concerns relate to three principal areas. Number one, a precedent. If this certificate is granted, it effectively confirms that a dwelling of this nature may be converted into a children's home operating on a shift system with staff and managed visitation arrangements without the need for full planning scrutiny. That interpretation will inevitably be relied upon in future cases. This committee must therefore be satisfied that the assessment is robust and fully aligned with established case laws concerning the definition of a single household and the distinction between C3 and C2 uses. Second, character and activity levels. Whilst the physical fabric of the building may remain largely unchanged, planning is not solely about bricks and mortar. It's about the character of the use of that property. The introduction of employed carers operating in shifts, a structured management system and professional visitation arrangements does introduce an entirely different pattern of comings and goings compared to a typical single family household. The question is not whether such activity is acceptable in principle, but whether it is materially different in planning terms. Thirdly, local amenity and cumulative impact. Glebe Close, Chair, is an established cul-de-sac with increasingly constrained parking and with an already dense and overpopulated character, particularly adjacent to number 12. Even if each individual element appears comparable to a family home in isolation, the committee must consider whether taken together cumulatively, the operational reality differs in kind rather than degree. It is also relevant that a previous lawful development certificate included a numerical limitation regarding occupancy and visitors. The current application moves away from that prescriptive cap towards a management-based approach. Members should consider whether that change weakens clarity and enforceability. Again, I stress this is not about resisting provision for children in care. It's about ensuring that the correct planning route is used and that the authority is not inadvertently lowering the threshold for scrutiny in future appeals or proposals. As members, you are not being asked to decide whether a children's home is morally justified here. You are being asked to decide whether this specific proposal genuinely falls outside the definition of development and whether granting a certificate this evening sets a clear and defendable position in the future. If members are fully satisfied there is no material change of use in planning terms, then consistency demands that conclusion. However, if there is any doubt as to whether the operational characteristics move this proposal beyond what would be reasonably expected of a single dwelling in a residential cul-de-sac, then doubt should weigh carefully in your deliberations. Finally, I respectfully ask the committee to consider the precedent being established, the cumulative implications for similar residential areas, and the importance of maintaining public confidence in planning decisions that are transparent, consistent, and grounded in established legal principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping to time. Right, members, over to you. Oh, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm familiar with the concept of basically a principle of development being established. There's already been a lawful development certificate for this property. So does that mean the principle of a lawful development certificate for this change of use has been established?
Yes, Councillor, we've already granted a certificate. I think the point that was picked up is in the previous certificate, there was sort of reference to six occupants at any one time, which reflected perhaps one visitor. So now it doesn't refer to that specifically, but they could still implement the previous one. The reason for that change is because the applicant's Ofsted inspector sort of looked at that previous description and said, well, what if, both parents at one time want to visit a child? So I think it was quite reasonable to sort of relax that standard. And I've also been informed that it's unlikely parents visit is infrequent, if at all, under these uses. So yes, in short, they can implement C2 use. It was just that was an issue that was picked up in the previous one that the applicant wants to rectify.
Thank you. So the only differences between this application for a lawful development certificate and the certificate that had previously been issued were that dropping the age of the children by a year from 12 to 11, and the staff changeover hours changing, and rather than limiting the number of people within the building to 6, limiting the number of visitors, a visitor management system is being brought in. So on that basis, I'll move the officer recommendation, which you may want to park, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Guest. Yes, I will park it for the moment. I've got Councillor, I thought I had Councillor Madden wanting to speak, and then I've got Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, thank you. I was just literally looking to slightly word it differently, but ask what Councillor Guest was just asking. So it's just like the base position is what the lawful development certificate is now. So it's literally just those tiny tweaks that are the difference.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, don't want to keep people too long. I just had a couple of questions. Would you need to have permission for change of use for a 4-person HMO, which I think falls beneath the registration?
I believe I think that's C3C use is up to 6 people. Correct? Yes, so you could have up to 6 people in a HMO without requiring planning.
Okay, and so I'm just thinking up sort of comparisons and parking, because looking at the satellite, it's clearly a very cramped site, and you've got the 2 new, but I guess they're new houses, 10A and 10, which is it's amazing from the top, because when you look at it from the street view, how do they get access to their houses? But you can see it from above. So the only concerns I would have would be around parking, and I was going to ask what the options if we were to turn down the certificate, but I don't think we need to answer that because of the precedent that we've just been clarified. Thank you.
Any further questions? Right, so if...
Chair, sorry, just briefly about the visitor management system. How is that going to be controlled and enforced?
I think what we're capturing is a certain point in time. So in there, I'm basing my decision off the information they provided me, which is they will implement a visitor management system to avoid overclustering of visits. And I think, so if you have 2 parents visit, they're not going to have 2 kids, families visit at the same time. It's the same with the professional visits. And I think it's just, I'm sort of in my report trying to make a judgment on the intensity of the use compared to, you could have 2 parents and 3 children in that house as a single family unit, and you could have sort of 2 grandparents visit at the same time, etc. So I think it's just based on that information given, and obviously the intensity rises beyond that to a certain degree, then the local authority can invite a planning application at that point.
Show my ignorance for a moment. Can you have conditions on lawful development certificates?
No, we can't. That's why I try and capture as much in the description.
That's what I thought. Thank you. And I'm just focusing in on the doubt that Councillor Hannell brought up. I think again we're back to previous discussions where we have to focus on what's changed from what the precedent has been set. The age difference is neither here nor there. It's this crucial bit about controlling the people in the property and the visitor management system. I can't see a way we can control that, so I'm happy to second the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson. Well, if there are no further comments, we've got a proposer for officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour, please? 11? 11 in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Me. So officer's recommendation is carried. Thank you. Now 9:05. Can I suggest that we have a break now and reconvene, what, 15:15 or 20:15? 15:15. Right. And then we'll move on to item number 6. Okay. Oh, proposed was Councillor Guest, and Councillor Anderson. Councillor Riddick, you're not... For a minute, I thought you were abusing our officer. Right. This could be an interesting conversation for the next period. Philip, we're going to treat this like a scrutiny meeting with Philip handling most of the officer report and the introduction into it. And we go through each of the different aspects that we are trying to make a decision on. Over to you, Philip.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So, yeah, this item seeks to make amendments to 3 parts of the Constitution. And if we go to the first slide, those 3 parts are Part 3, responsibility for functions. Essentially, this is the scheme of delegation. This part informs everyone what applications can be decided and have been delegated to officers and therefore don't need to come to committee. Part 4 is the rules of procedure relating to meetings and council business, and there are paragraphs within that that deal with DMC. And then part 5 is codes and protocols, and one code or protocol is within that is the planning code of practice. So this report seeks changes within all 3 parts. So next. So yeah, the report provides a lot of kind of background information and explanations in terms of why I'm seeking to make these changes. I was very grateful for the member support in the workshop that we did that looked through the Planning Advisory Service Toolkit, which has developed a series of questions, and it goes through the whole committee process and outlines best practice through their research up and down the country. So, so there are some elements that are being introduced, some of the procedural clarifications, some of the changes within the planning code of practice are to align decorum with best practice. We also need to be conscious of the Planning and Infrastructure Act 2025. This allows the introduction of regulations to introduce a national scheme of delegation. The announcements from government that this would be expected in early summer, or at least a consultation perhaps on the regulations. And it's my view that I can't see a national scheme of delegation without excluding householders from coming to planning committee. I don't see why the government would seek to introduce a national scheme of delegation and not exclude householders. So in that sense, those changes are coming. There's clearly a high workload within the development management team, and we have, in the last 18 months, received an exceptional large number of major planning applications, such as the Haresfoot scheme considered this evening. And this proposal, therefore, would allow both officers and members the time to focus on those larger and more complex applications. And then the final point is more one of a supplementary point. The first 3 are the main points. Members are aware that we have exceeded the 10% threshold for the quality of decision making in respect of major development over the relevant period. So again, I'm expecting a letter in April to say that we have exceeded that 10% threshold and to explain the situation. And these discussions and these changes could form part of that response, in the sense that, again, touching on the 3rd bullet point, that the changes are allowing the council to to focus on those larger, more complex applications. So it would form part of that picture. Next slide. So yeah, so as mentioned, there's 3 different parts that I would be very grateful for a discussion on this evening and to receive members' views and ultimately direction of travel for next steps. Because it's a large, in totality it's quite large, I would like the discussion to be split into those different parts. So let's focus on part 3 first, and then have a vote on it, and then move to 4, and then move to 5. So if I introduce part 3, next slide. Some of the statistics in the report I provided were the research of the last 5 years of planning committees in respect of householder planning applications. And we can see that there are 80 householders heard at Development Management Committee in that time, of which 73 went with the officer recommendation. We can also see that approximately 2 per year were called in by ward councillors. The vast majority, a considerable amount were called in due to the contrary view of town and parish councils. The ward councillor call-in is relatively small in comparison. Next slide. And then out of those 7 that didn't go with the officer recommendation, we can see that 4 appeals were subsequently allowed, and 1 was dismissed, and 1 was a reverse situation. So the refuse scheme, officer recommendation to refuse was granted, and the last one there, they reverted to an earlier permission. So the overarching point here is that in a 5-year period, only 2 householder applications that needed to go to committee ultimately had a different decision compared to if it hadn't needed to come to committee. So in that sense, coming to committee has a negligible impact on ultimate decision making. Next. I also had a look, and I appreciate this was back in 2022, yes, I had a look in 2022 in terms of other local authorities in Hertfordshire, and we can see that Decorum was the only authority that allowed both an unrestricted town and parish council call-in and a ward councillor call-in. And there are some authorities there that allow call-ins, but subject to the chair's agreement or the ward council's agreement, so that they have some kind of filter process. It's not an automatic straight to committee. Next slide. So the proposed changes is essentially, I guess the headline would be to remove householders from planning committee. And that would be in respect of the town and parish council contrary view, in respect of ward councillor call-in, and also in respect of staff and member applications. It's also proposed to remove lawful development certificates, proposed to be considered under delegated powers. At the moment, town and parish councils have no call-in power in respect of lawful development certificates, but ward councillors do, and therefore this proposal would align that. And then the final introduction is the significant public interest test. So at the moment, if in the view of the head of DM or the assistant director, there is significant public interest, then it has to come to planning committee. Now, there are situations such as the recent application in Tring, where we had the sports facility, where there was significant public interest, but that was totally in support, and officers were also in support. So this change is simply seeking, in that scenario, it no longer needs to come to committee. So if the significant public interest is in objection to a scheme, then it would still come to committee. or if it was a significant public interest because it was 50-50 or more balanced. So if we go to the next slide. So there are essentially two options being proposed, and interested to hear thoughts. One is to make those changes to the scheme of delegation that I've outlined, kind of a very kind of clean change. But the second change would be not to change the scheme of delegation. So, for example, the town and parish councils would still retain that call-in if they had a contrary view to officers, but that would be subject to a chair filter. So ultimately it would then be down to the chair to have the final say on whether the application needs to be heard at planning committee or not. So it's certainly my preference, as outlined in the report, to have a cleaner change to the scheme of delegation. It avoids an additional administrative step, and it reduces any potential for kind of inconsistency. So if we go to the final slide for this item. So the discussion point for members: should household planning applications continue to be heard at DMC? If yes, would this apply in all circumstances? So, for example, should ward councillors still be allowed to call in, but not town and parish council, or the reverse? And then the third question: should applications with significant public interest, but overwhelmingly in support, and which officers also support, be heard at DMC? And then the final question: if there isn't support for a change to a scheme of delegation, is there support for the introduction of a chair filter process? So that concludes my introduction on part 3. So, as I say, we can focus on part 3 for the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. You haven't mentioned the consultation you've done with the parish councils and what the outcome of that is. And then we've got Councillor Anderson wanting to say a few words, as does Councillor Madden.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's very important. So, yes, as part of this work, I did undertake, I did a presentation to the town and parish councils that attend our monthly meeting, and that was followed with a 3-week consultation. And the results of that consultation have been added to the addendum, and it's certainly fair to say that the majority, in some cases, the large majority of town and parish councils were against these proposed changes.
And Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I do get it, but on the chart that you had of all of the applications that we were talking about in 2025, no, the one that was detailed of the next slide, I think it was, yeah, that one. The second one up from the bottom, the DBC employee, that one had been refused originally because it wasn't picked up that it was a DBC employee. And I called that in and got her to resubmit it. Now, when I spoke against officer recommendation on that, and it was unanimous to grant that application. Now, if we binned this idea of being able to call these in, it was a DBC employee, even if it wasn't a DBC employee, there was a unanimous committee here that couldn't understand why the officer had wanted to refuse it. And it would have lost that person the opportunity to even have it sort of thought about by anybody else. And I'm just a little bit concerned about that, because for me it was very, very easy that should have been granted, and everybody clearly agreed with me the day that it came to committee. So I'm just a little bit concerned about even if you scrap the idea that it was a DBC employee, but that DBC employee had contacted me, not realising it had to come anyway as an employee. If we left in the ward councillor call in, then, but you know, all the other things, fair enough, but that ward councillor call in, then whether it was a DBC employee or anybody else could ask their ward councillor. If their ward councillor thought it was, you know, clearly something that should be at the committee, because they didn't agree with what the officer was recommending, that would pick things like that up. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that very well.
Yes, no, that does make sense. Yes, and this is why, although the proposals kind of batch householders together, there are 3 areas of the Constitution seeking changes, and members may not agree to all 3, but may agree to 2 of them or 1 of them. Yeah. So this is, so I guess the safety net in that particular example is that the application was refused, and therefore the applicant would always have an opportunity to appeal. Whereas when it's granted, that there is no third-party right of appeal. So, so there was a safety net in that particular example for that applicant.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The applicant came to me before they appealed, I suppose, is what happened. And I just said, I've got no idea why they didn't want to approve that. I just couldn't understand it. I've sat on this committee for 11 years, and I looked at it and I thought, I have no idea why they don't want to approve that. I have no idea. So I just, and everybody on the committee agreed with me. So I just think that, I think as ward councillors, I think maybe it's because we're on the committee. Maybe other ward councillors that have never been on a committee maybe wouldn't have had such a strong view, but I don't know. I just wanted to flag that because that's something I would like to see ward councillors still able to call anything in.
Philip, I don't believe we are totally stopping ward councillors calling in. There's going to be a different process that we're going to be introducing on that to register a call-in.
No, that's not what
Ward councillor referrals.
So I think this is the 2 options. And we do have to remember that this is only in relation to householders.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't relate to minor development or major development. But yeah, my preference would be to have a clean break so it's very clear in the Constitution that householders are part of the scheme of delegation and therefore can be determined under delegated powers. If members are reluctant to go down that route, then my option B is to keep the scheme of delegation as it is, but then to have the chair filter process. So in that scenario, it would be presented to the chair the reasons why the ward councillor feels it needs to go to committee, and then the chair would have the final say. So that would be the option B that's being put forward.
Sorry, I thought that there was an option that ward councillors. I thought that's what you said in the thing, that ward council, that we could say ward councillors can bring them in, but not town and parish councillors. That was one of the options. That rather than that be filtered, that would just be a. Is that not the case?
Yes. So an option C in that sense would be to make no change whatsoever to that particular section of the Constitution in respect of ward councillors. So so in all of these examples we're thinking about, there are 3 options. Include it in the scheme of delegation, so it no longer comes to committee, full stop. Don't change the scheme of delegation, but introduce a chair filter. Or don't change the scheme of delegation and don't introduce a chair filter. So keep it exactly as it is. So there's 3 options in that sense.
Chair, I do wonder if this is a little premature, with the government threatening to bring in the national delegation requiring 10 houses or more to be a requirement for any planning application to refer to committee. I just wonder if this is just a little bit too early and we ought to just let the government do the dirty work for us. But having said that, I would make 3 detailed comments. One is, I would be opposed to the idea of not referring applications by staff and members to the committee because for ethical reasons, I think that's better. And that includes trees and conservation areas. Secondly, I actually, before tonight's meeting, I didn't think members could refer lawful development certificates to this committee because I tried in the past and been told I couldn't. So I'm used to the idea of not being able to call that in. What I would say is, if the rest of the committee do want some change, I would ask colleagues to do the chair field. Well, I mean, existing delegation is quite interesting because it's not only the chair, but the portfolio holder can call in applications as well.
I should definitely keep that.
Yeah, sorry for bringing that up. So I just wonder if the portfolio holder and chair should be able to monitor this as well, which is another form of complication when we're looking for clarity, I know. But I mean, if we have to have change, then I would like to see that check and balance on it, because I'm aware of there was a major FHA in my ward involving a 2 up, 2 down semi property in a residential street, and the applicant wanted to put a wraparound extension on it for 6 bedrooms, and there was next to no parking in the property, next to no parking in the road, and it was a huge battle. The officer's recommendation was to grant. It got refused. It got fast-tracked to appeal in circumstances that weren't ideal, and it got allowed on appeal. And that just whole experience just leaves me with a little worry that if members can't refer or can't appeal to somebody to have an FHA referred to the committee, then we're leaving ourselves open for some things that could go wrong. So, I mean, possibly one, I'm not actually answering the question here, but maybe one option would be, simpler option would be, say, ward councillors keep the trigger, but not the parish councils, which is what Councillor Madden's saying. If change is to come, then maybe that's the way of doing it. And I, with regret, would be forced to support that. I just, if we are scrapping it, I just would like some check and balance on it. That's all.
Check and balance.
Yeah.
Councillor England and then Councillor Smith-Wright.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is it possible to look at the slide that shows what happens in other districts? The reason I say that is because it's only a few months before we find out which version of LGR we're likely to have. And it might be sensible to wait for that. So that's one suggestion. I was also leaning towards the Madden-Anderson theory of retaining an element, retaining a route, but doing something to ameliorate some of the issue. And I definitely think that if there is a significant interest, that should be an override factor. And that might pick up Councillor Anderson's issue of a 6-bedroom extension on a 2 up, 2 down, because it might generate sufficient interest being a sticky outy one. So those are my thoughts.
Councillor Smith-Wright, then Councillor Jankowski.
Thank you. Yes, I was interested, I would be interested to know what town and parish councils' reasons they were not pleased with this suggestion.
Yep, just allow me to open the addendum. So the most of the questions were a simple, do you agree? Yes, no, don't know. So in terms of removing the call-in for household or planning applications when there was a contrary view to town and parish councils, only 1 agreed with that proposal and 10 didn't. In terms of the proposals for removing the call-in for householders and lawful dwelling certificates for ward councillors, only 2 were in favour, 8 against, and 1 didn't know. And then in terms of the amending the significant public interest test, and I repeat, that's only in situations where there's overwhelming support for a development, and officers are also recommending support. That was closer, but still 64% didn't want to proceed with that change to that test. Now, in terms of there was a question, an opportunity to provide further comments, and that's detailed in the addendum. There are a couple of lengthy comments. There are, I guess, concerns about reduction of local democracy. There was I guess, the important role of DMC in being that kind of public-facing decision-making body, and the removal of perceived by residents as the removal of their democratic right to state their views to the planning committee. Another council mentioned that it would be preferable if there were so I guess communication channels between officers and the town and parish councils, because the town and parish councils can and do change their mind in light of those conversations. Yeah, so I guess that was they were the concerns raised by the town and parish councils.
Thank you. Just want to respond. I would actually say that town and parish councils are closer to the residents than councillors, and I would say that it's better they hold, they have committees, they really know their residents, they know these houses, and we're less powerful really to actually deliver what residents want. So I'm personally, I would prefer maybe we come out of the picture and the town and parish councils retain that right.
Can I just mention that one of the things that has been taking place in recent months is that when we the town council, make a comment, an objection, or a strong concern about a particular application, what appears to be happening is that the case officer will come back to us and talk to us about a possible amendment that they're bringing through. And if they've agreed that with the applicant, that comes back to us. We have an informal discussion amongst ourselves if time is pressing, and then ratify it at the next meeting. The point about it is, by changing our mind in between, it saves the officer having to do a report which goes to DMC, and it gives us a second bite of the approval process. That's a pragmatic way of achieving what we're trying to do here, I think. Right, the next one is Councillor Jankowski.
Thank you, Chair. apologies if I'm jumping around a bit. There's a lot. I feel like there's a lot to unpack here. Just on Councillor Smith-Wright's point, my concern, because I had initially thought whether it should be something that, in terms of call-in, is just a sort of concern with that is what happens to household elder applications in unparished areas and then being slightly advantaged. I think fundamentally I agree with a lot of the points raised so far, particularly sort of Councillor Madden's point. I mean, yeah, there's only 2 applications over the past 5 years. Against one ended up ultimately going against the initial recommendation, but those are still 2 applications. I think it's an important function of the us as councillors to be able to in household applications, even if they're, they might not have significant public interest, but they might have significant interest and impacts on neighbouring residents, for example. I'm jumping around a bit, as I said, but in terms of, sort of option 2, in terms of introducing I feel like we're jumping from being the anomaly and having, this table, looking at the table, it feels like we're jumping from being the outlier across Hertfordshire and having yes to both, straight to almost having no to both, and that would be a concern for me. And I think, I would welcome some form of filter in it being automatic. I mean, I grew up in St Albans, where so not used to it being, automatically, everything go to wherever there's an objection, it'll go to committee. I do welcome Councillor Anderson's point on whether that should go. Councillor Anderson's point, sorry, on that having a sort of check and balance in place if we were to go with the option of the sort of chair filter process. I don't know, my 2 questions are just in relation to, if we were to go down the route of that option, what would be your thoughts in terms of additional sort of caseload on the chair of that route? And then separately, would there be an option? I know it's slightly outside of the box, but as a sort of check and balance in that case, to have it be chair and vice chair, perhaps?
Yeah, so I'm just referring to my report. I don't know whether I proposed, yes, in paragraph 5.12, talks about a potential way that a chair filter process would take place. So it would be, you would still get, for example, the town and parish council contrary view. That would generate a form which officers would fill in with a summary of the proposals, consultee responses and key issues. And then that form would be taken to the chair, or chair plus portfolio holder, or chair plus vice chair, depending on the process. And then there would need to be a decision amongst that individual or those individuals as to whether it went to committee. So yes, it would introduce as I mentioned in the introduction, a further administrative step, and it would necessitate I guess a meeting between myself and the chair and the vice chair, for example. But that is achievable if the chair filter process is the preferred option.
Would that be, when you say a meeting between yourself and the chair, would that be one meeting that could cover sort of several items, as it were, to sort of streamline that process slightly? Or was that per application?
No, it's envisaged that it would take place periodically with all the relevant applications heard in one go.
Thank you.
Councillor Hobson's been waiting very patiently here, and so's Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think on one hand, the proposal, so firstly, I should say I do understand that too many household applications come here. And a lot of the time it's not clear why they have come. And a lot of the time, if it's called in by a town and parish council, the town and parish councils don't send anyone, although that has reduced what was after we kicked up a fuss. But having said that, I mean, on one hand, you know, I'm a bit concerned about decreasing the democratic accountability. You know, we hear people speaking against applications. They put a lot of thought into it. They do see us as a way of exercising their rights and democratic rights to be involved in decision making in their local area, and many of whom are very passionate about it. But on the other hand, and particularly with the direction of travel with planning policy, we have so few reasons and so little power really to overturn decisions, because the presumption is all, and the tilted balance and all those sorts of things is often in the bent towards the benefit of the planning of going through. So it is difficult, and you know, you've heard me say tonight and other nights how frustrated I get with the lack of levers in a planning application that I don't like for whatever reason. But again, we shouldn't just be turning down things just because we don't like them. Hopefully, reasonable material reasons most of the time. Also, on reflection, I mean, it might be too early because we don't really know what's happening, but with the local government reviews, we don't really know what's happening with town and parish councils, with places that aren't parished now. And I do agree with the fact that there are plenty of places, particularly Haresfoot in Dacorum, that don't have town and parish councils. So I would be in favour of ward councillors being more involved. I believe ward councillors are very switched on and connected with their communities. If we do reduce the amount of planning applications that come here, or decisions, or we take out interested parties, so staff and members of the committee or councillors, then I think we would need to find a way of increasing visibility, so at least we know what's going on. If there's a way that we could do that, which isn't just the planning applications that have come in list. I don't know how to do that without it becoming resource intensive, but I think if we're reducing the amount of time we have to make decisions, I think it would be, we need to think about how do we get visibility of that. I'm more in favour of conditional call-ins and more involvement, and in retaining some involvement of ward councillors. So, for example, the North Herts system appeals to me. But again, we might have to look at ways of making sure that the parish councils do have the training and the material reasons for bringing something to us, and they do come and speak on behalf. So it's not an easy decision, I don't think, to make, because officers do have very high workloads, and we do see a lot of things that come here that I do scratch my head sometimes at why are we looking at it. So I think I'm probably in favour of reducing the workload and reducing the number of household applications. I'm open-minded about reducing it to 0 if we can cover the visibility point. And I've completely lost my train of thought, but you're probably fed up with hearing me now. But yes, so the final thing was, so your point about if you did want to have some kind of conditional, then you would keep the constitution as it is, but we would need to agree a process. So I think that's my preference, but that's in the context of, you know, the local government stuff's going to change in a couple of years. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, if I may just, so yeah, certainly in terms of the visibility of planning applications, that as a similar example, when members agreed that enforcement action could be delegated, that was balanced with a quarterly enforcement report. So one of the proposals in the planning code of practice, and I'm breaking my own rule here and jumping about, but that does propose a quarterly planning report. And yes, I fully accept the arguments that have been made in terms of democratic representation and the need for ward councillor involvement. That's what I'm hearing loud and clear. But I don't necessarily agree with the points in terms of local government review or the government paper, because these are potentially many months down the line, and we have an opportunity to deal with issues that are currently occurring in terms of workload and, as I say, the letter we're expecting in April. But thank you, Chair.
Right. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman.
And then I'll go to Councillor Williams. Councillor Madden, you've already had a go at this. We'll wait for it. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. And removing local development certificates, that would make sense because they come to this committee so rarely. I've been on this committee, estimate since 2014. I've only seen 2 ever come to committee, so they might as well be removed. And removing the town and parish councillor call-in for householders, yes, because I've seen things called in to this committee by town and parish councillors. If they were in an unparish ward, would never come anywhere near the committee. The fences, door and conservation area, and those of us who were on the committee at the time will never forget the red telephone box as a garden ornament in Berkhamsted. So if the town and parish council does have a concern about an application, they could always discuss that with the ward councillor. So there is a good case for keeping the ward councillor call-in for householders as a final backstop so it can go through the democratic process. And household applications by members and officers, they usually go through on the nod, so they might as well be removed from the committee. I have concern about the chair filter because development management chairs are human and they may well be coloured by what they think about the application. So I have concerns about that. If it involved the vice chair, do I have to declare an interest here? That if it involved the vice chair and or the portfolio holder as well, that would help to reduce that, particularly if one of them represented the parish area and the other or others didn't. But we're still talking about human beings making the final decision rather than a clear, transparent, definite written scheme of delegation.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give this a go and hope you can hear me. Just to summarise, there's a lot been said on this, but just a few of my thoughts. I would oppose removing member and staff referrals to committee because the perception would be that the councillor puts an application, gets his mate in the planning department to pass it. It's not the reality, but it's too open to perception. If the neighbour doesn't like it, they're going to feel that, it's been a bit under the counter. At least if it goes to committee, there are so few, it's irrelevant. That's my first point. Referrals from town or parish councils via those from ward councillors. The point's been made that if you take it away from ward councillors, you take it away from half the borough, effectively. As well, if you keep it a ward councillor, 100% of the borough still has the right to get a referral to committee at some point. But I would do that on the basis it would be absolutely, and I think it usually is the case, but it would absolutely be the requirement, not an expectation, that the person calling it in, the member calling it in, comes to committee and speaks. Don't call it in and waste the committee's time by staying at home and letting them chat about it. So, on balance, I would support taking away the town and parish council's rights, provided the board members have still got it. I think the reference to LGR is completely a red herring and irrelevant. this is a scheme of delegation while decorum's here. LGR will produce a different council with its own scheme of delegation that it decides for itself. Excuse me. And clearly if it's influenced by majority of councils and whatever form they merge, it's unlikely to have a calling process that is similar to ours because no one else has. So I don't think we need to worry about LGR. There's a completely different process that comes along and means the end of our scheme and the start of another one. I mean, we've been around this debate, I don't know how many times. Well, I've been a member, 10 at least, I should think. Every time we've stepped back for democratic reasons or from making a move, we're under more pressure now. And also, as we've seen this evening in the first application, because it's almost cruel in a way, because it's referred to committee, there's an illusion, almost it is an illusion in most cases, that this committee's got any real power to act outside a very narrow set of rules that it's now operating in. And you're giving people an illusion they can come along and speak to this committee and it's going to change the process. 99% of cases it doesn't, because we are, as I think Councillor Hobson said, we're sitting here with both our hands tied behind our back and our feet tied together and rubber stamping. We are a rubber stamping committee. So it will save them coming along and spending a night trying to hope they're going to change the process. Almost invariably not.
Thank you for that. Councillor Madden.
Thank you. A lot of other councillors have touched on a lot of what I wanted to say, but I would just like to make the point that Councillor Smith-Wright mentioned that parish councillors are closer to their residents than ward councillors. I absolutely disagree with that. 100% disagree with that. I've got a fantastic parish council in Nash Mills, but when you stand at the shops, everybody comes to talk to me rather than the others because they know me much better. So I don't agree with that, and I think that the ward councillor thing is very important. But my question is, what about you talked about the public interest if the officer wanted to recommend approval and there was a lot of public interest, even if all of that was supporting approval. What if it was the other way around and it was that the officer wanted to refuse and the public, like Shepherd Knoll, that was a really good example. It came to committee because of all of the public interest, but everybody wanted it refused, and Rob was recommending refusal on it. So I don't know why it was one way and not the other way on your report. You might have written it in the report and I might have missed it. But...
Sorry, Councillor Madden, I think what we're looking for is principles here as opposed to a comment on a particular application.
No, it's not on a
No,
it's not about a particular application. I was using that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
The screen, the questions said, and we discussed this at Parish Council on Monday night, that the questions actually said, that was it, no, back, no, there was one there, significant public interest, the test is not needed. Oh yeah, this is the changes, yeah. So at the moment you're saying that if there's significant public interest, but it's recommending approval and everybody agrees with that, fine. But what if I want to know, what about the other way around?
Yeah, and we have, I do remember an application in Ashridge where every single comment was an objection. Sufficient comments to say that it was significant public interest, and officers also recommended refusal. And I recall in that committee meeting, members were asking, well, why is this that committee? Bear in mind, everyone is in agreement before it comes to us that this should be refused.
Exactly the same as Shepherd's Knoll, exactly the same.
So if that's the general consensus, that in both kind of extreme examples where it's all in support, both by residents and officers, or all against, then that significant interest test isn't triggered. But if there's any kind of...
Okay, it's just that it says up there.
Yes, the proposal wasn't in both ways, but I'm happy to take that forward.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Right.
So I summarise, Chair, and then...
I was about to say that time is pressing and it's time to sort of come to a conclusion on this particular aspect.
Yeah, so so I think it would be useful to take a vote. I don't think we're ever going to get 100% consensus on everything, but listening to the very interesting debate, I think the majority of members have, or the vast majority, have indicated that there should be no change to ward councillor. So that's off the table. And there's been significant concern about making changes in respect of member and staff applications. So I would suggest that that is also off the table. Conversely, I think there has been some support for the proposal to remove the town and parish council call-in respect of householders, to remove the ward councillor call-in respect of lawful development certificates, and also to amend the significant public interest test, but in both scenarios, both extreme support and extreme refusal. So I don't know, Chair, whether we could vote on those three changes alone. So town and parish council contrary view in respect of householders, that would no longer apply. Ward councillor call-in for LDPs, that would no longer apply, and the significant public interest test would be amended. So, Chair, are we able to vote on those three?
Right. Just to clarify, because I believe Councillor Williams was saying that although we might be able to do that for parish councils, it ought to retain the ability for parish council type applications to come through via the ward councillor. Is that right?
Effectively be ward councillor call-ins, wouldn't they?
Yes. Yeah. Ward councillor call-ins.
Yes, so we're not voting on ward councillor call-ins because that's now off the table.
Yeah.
So we're voting on changes. And so, yeah, are we okay to vote on those three changes?
Right.
Chair, sorry, could I just ask a point of clarification on the significant public interest test? Is that, when you say extreme one way or another, is that 100%? Or is that, you know, if there were 100 supporters for an application, officer recommendation was for support, but there was one objection or two objections, would that be constituted extreme, or where do we draw the line?
Yeah. So I think the way I've worded it in the report was overwhelmingly, but again, that does create, so if it's members' preference, then we, you know, to have an easy to understand rule, it would be 100%. So
difficult to judge. Take it on the day, I think, is a term. Right. Are we now able to make a judgment on this? Okay. Philip is agreed. Votes for the option that Philip has just summarised on. In favour? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That looks like a unanimous to me. 12. Yep. Okay. 12. 12. I think I'm in favour. It's unusual, but I'm with you on this one. Right, moving swiftly on, we've got the...
So I think part 4 should be very, a bit simpler in comparison. Next slide. So I've just on the left-hand side highlighted 4 current issues. So at the moment, we often talk about the 10 and 10:30 p.m. cut-off times, but it's not actually written anywhere. So the proposal here is that it is written into part 4, and what it would say is that in order to start an item past 10 p.m., we would need a vote, and no item can start after 10:30. So what it does mean is that if an item, if an item is anticipated that it's going to take 20 minutes, it could potentially start at 10:20 and finish at 10:40, but you can't start an item after 10:30, and clearly we wouldn't start an item that's going to take an hour at 10:29. So, it's clarifying that rule. The second issue is single speakers playing the system. So we have had situations where it's always been the intention for one person to speak, but they register as a pair. That single person speaks for 4 minutes, 59 seconds, and the second person says, oh, I don't need to speak. So the solution to that is to limit each single speaker, other than ward councillors, to 3 minutes. Then the third point is that there is often a lengthy, and rightly so, debate, and key points are made by members, but also critically, some additional conditions are proposed, or additional informatives, and that might get lost just before the vote if that was made half an hour ago. So it's just an opportunity for the chair. It doesn't have to happen, but the chair would have the option to ask the lead planner to summarise the key matters and changes to conditions for reasons. And the fourth one, and this is potentially the biggest, well, this is the biggest proposal. In the event that the officer recommendation falls, at the moment, we have a situation where reasons for refusal are discussed in this public forum in front of the future appellant. And there are officers and member discussions about whether it's a valid reason for refusal. In my view, this is an internal conversation, and therefore we could introduce a process, which is done in other authorities, to allow members, officers, legal, to go to the conference room or the members' room and have that conversation and adjourn the meeting. Again, the limitations would be that could only be applied in respect of major planning applications. And we wouldn't want adjournments for householders and things like that. So only for majors. And again, it's an option for the chair to request it. It doesn't have to be done. So that's the proposed solutions to those 4 issues I've outlined. Thank you, Chair. Do we have agreement on that?
I've got a question.
I've got a question.
Andrew's got a question before me.
Well, it's not really a question, it's more a concern. Happy with all of them apart from number 2, because at the moment we have a 3-minute or 5-minute rule. It specifically refers to pairs there, but if 3 people register, they share the 5 minutes. The way that's written, 10 people could register and get 3 minutes each.
Yes, so sorry, that's a very good point. And to clarify, it wouldn't change the total number of minutes available. So if there were 3 speakers, they would still have 5 minutes. But in the sharing of that 5 minutes, no individual speaker could speak for more than 3 minutes.
Okay, as long as because it's not clear from that. So it gives the impression that every speaker would get 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, but that's not the case.
Okay, well, with that proviso, I'm happy.
Right. We've tightened up the language in the procedure itself, right? Councillor Madden.
That was exactly going to be my question. And when I was reading through the other day, I was thinking, no, that can't be right. There can't be 10 or 15 speakers, but that's good.
Okay. Right. Are we agreed on this? Right. Do we need a show of hands? Just agreed. Agreed. Okay.
Then finally, part 5 So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so as I put here, the current planning code of conduct is not out of date. It was changed in 2023. But in light of the work that was undertaken with the PAS toolkit, there are some parts that don't reflect PAS best practice. And I also saw it as an opportunity to provide more detail in respect to pre-DMC briefings and member training as two particular areas. And it allows, for example, the introduction and to make the arrangements less ad hoc as they are currently, because when there's a briefing, it's ad hoc. When there's training, it's ad hoc. And the idea is that there would be a kind of a set calendar for both of them. And there are areas of member and officer involvement in planning that are not contained within the current planning code of conduct, such as the role of the chair, the role of officers at DMC. So it's kind of introducing some guidance to officers in terms of what their presentations should and shouldn't contain. But also opportunities for everyone to provide feedback on DMC procedures, so it becomes kind of an improvement loop. And next slide. So the bullet points here where in the report, hopefully it was clear where it was in red, that was the proposed changes. So the role of officers at DMC in terms of presentations and answering member questions. It focuses on the role of the lead planner in summarising the key points ahead of the vote. The process for member call-ins. I understand that there is part of the new member portal, there will be a member call-in form. So it would require the use of that form. The role of the chair at DMC, it provides a distinction between pre-application briefings and DMC briefings. So at the moment we do have DMC briefings. I'm not aware of any member-wide pre-application briefings, but that is possible. The arrangements for formal site visits for DMC applications, member decision-making, the arrangements for performance reports to be heard at DMC, so that's introduced in the new planning report, alongside the planning enforcement report, clarification on member training and feedback loops. So that's what the proposed changes focus on. So I think the two questions I had there were, do you agree with the areas of focus in respect of making changes to the planning code of practice? And are there any other parts of the proposed planning code of practice you consider requires further clarity?
There's a huge amount of reading in this document, lots of preparation. Are we agreed? Thank you.
Chair, if I can just ask, it's not actually on Philip's proposals, but there was one thing we discussed during the workshop, which I thought gained some traction, and it may be in the pipeline and it's just not been documented here. And that is whether our case officers could take a leaf out of the planning inspector's book. Because with the planning inspector appeal reports, right at the beginning of the report, it identifies in bullet points the obvious points at hand or the issues at hand, that it really pulls out what are the issues that were being debated and considered. And I just wonder if we could do that with our agenda reports for this committee as well, Chair.
Yes, we certainly can. So we do at the moment provide within the report the key issues, but we could bring that right to the top. So yes, we can certainly take that away and look to make that change.
Well, before we close this evening, we've got item 7. It calls the appeals update. I think we just noted, yes?
see if it's ratcheting up the record for the number of appeals. It must be, I think they're up to about 34 applications and 20 appeals.
Yes, it's that kind of numbers. It was actually generated an article in the Watford Observer online due to the sheer number of applications.
Right. Right, well, thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.